Welcome to PseudoPod, the weekly horror podcast. We will show you fear in a handful of syllables. Go forward at your own risk. PseudoPod, November 5th, 2021. Episode 783. This week's story, Sleep Hygiene by Gemma Files. Hey everyone, welcome to PseudoPod, the weekly horror podcast. I'm Alistair, your host, and this week's story comes to us from Gemma Files. It was first published in Nightmare's Realm, New Tales of the Weird and Fantastic, and reprinted this year in the collection In That Endlessness, Our End.
Audio production and dream bed for Sleep Hygiene, assembled from various field recordings by Sean M. Garrett and dedicated to Dion McGregor, look him up folks, he's hilarious, Brian Geisen, and Current 93.
Your narration is by the fantastic Tatiana Gray. I'm Alistair, your host, and we all have a story for you. And we promise you, it's true.
Sleep Hygiene by Gemma Files. Narrated by Tatiana Gray. Shut your eyes. Let your breathing slow. Then follow the map from any direction, and you will find you are there now, in that place, your place. Look to the horizon. Something is coming. A short list of things you may do when it comes. Cry, scream, flinch, shut your eyes again. Find yourself unable to shut your eyes. Find yourself short of breath, or unable to breathe entirely. Hear your own heart in your ears. Hear absolutely nothing. See absolutely nothing. Feel your face go blank. Feel your mind go blank. Watch everything cloud over, then go black. Find yourself elsewhere, discovering you've lost time. Think, I must have fainted. Have no proof this is true. Have no proof otherwise. Wake up. Fall asleep once more. Dream. Lose yourself. Wake up. Repeat. 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 Until one night, you never wake up again. I need you to make a map of whatever landscape you find yourself in next time you're there. Gracie Hollander told me, to which I frowned. Keep a dream diary, you mean? I replied. But she just shook her head. No, I don't, she said. I mean, do that too, obviously. But this is something different. It was only our second consultation, officially. My regular GP had recommended her to me, and I finally admitted I'd gone a month and a half without sleeping more than a third or quarter of the night. Fallen asleep at 3 or 4 or 5, always knowing I'd have to be up again before 8. Sometimes I'd steal a nap in the afternoon, and then pay for it. Get the bulk of my day's work done between 7 and 11, feel mounting fatigue suddenly permeate me like a drug injection, and brown the fuck out. Sleep from noon to 2 before waking again with groggy surprise to my iPhone's warbling alarm tone, mouth gummed and cheek sheet-printed, hair sweat stuck up in horns. And when midnight finally rolled around, I'd start the cycle all over again. Take a bath, brush my teeth, lie down whether I wanted to or not, and force myself to keep my eyes damned well shut while I took long, slow breaths through the nose, willing my monkey mind silent. Let go. Let go. Let go! Could count on one hand the times that worked, as a strategy, but it didn't ever seem to stop me trying. At least I live alone, I often caught myself thinking. Nobody but myself to inconvenience with this sad, stupid shit. Still, this was no sort of comfort at all in the long run. The way I lived, endured, existed, probably wasn't that different from the way anyone else around me did, except for the fact they might be dealing with it better. Because loneliness is this century's true disease, with every other problem just a symptom of the same. Anyhow, my doctor had told me I couldn't go on much longer this way without damaging myself irreparably, and I agreed, having no other option. So off to Gracie I was sent for lessons in what her employers at the Sleep Habits Clinic apparently called sleep hygiene. Think of sleep as a destination, she said, sketching freehand with a soft charcoal pen on the paper she'd placed between us. After already ticking off the usual checklist of pro-somnolence habits to cultivate. Don't eat after 6 p.m., drink nothing caffeinated, start a winding-down routine that involved turning off all my devices, taking a bath, making sure my bedroom was light-tight. A place securely located in time and space, with fixed coordinates. Like, if you could only find your way back there twice in a row, you could retrace your steps the same way forever, and never get lost again. Program it into my mental GPS, I suggested, not actually trying to be facetious, but she shot me a pointed glance, so I fell silent. The resultant map was divided into quarters, and the path she drew meandered through all 4 in a roughly circular fashion, spiral form like the world's easiest-to-beat maze. The terrain itself was intentionally generic, upside-down V's for mountains, looping scribbles for forests, a dashed white space for grasslands with wandering lines for rivers, a tiny shaded-in lake and a wooded island in the middle. But came out with a weird vividness nonetheless. Either Gracie was a born artist, or she'd done this so often she had it down to a skill, an idea I found somewhat troubling. I was no stranger to the concept of lending supposedly important tasks only a portion of my full attention, after all, though that was less a choice on my part, by this time, than a simple necessity. The only way I knew of to preserve what was left of my mind as the wall between waking and sleep grew ever more flexible, bulging darkly with the shadows of things that might lie beyond, and stretching my life out recklessly around the damage that left behind, like some slow-forming paratemporal bruise. Based mine on Strawberry Island, up in Lake Simcoe, Gracie said, indicating the central island with her eraser, as I belatedly forced myself to focus in on her voice once more, recalled to myself from yet another one of those increasingly too frequent microsleep episodes, apparently by the sharpening ring of her tone alone. I used to go there as a kid, so it's extra easy to summon a great little anchor. You might want to use someplace closer, a point on the Toronto Islands maybe, or whatever works for you. The key is it has to be a location that's an overall pleasant memory, yet has some clear element of separation from your normal life. What kind of places do you normally dream about? I shrugged. Honestly, I don't remember. When I sleep at all, I'm out, completely inert. Maybe I don't see anything. Unlikely. You'd have other symptoms if you really didn't dream. Gracie tapped her pencil against her teeth. Can you remember faces? What? Yeah, sure, of course. Okay, good. Then your brain probably isn't damaged. Probably. I furrowed my brow at her as she went on. True, complete dream loss is associated with focal, acute onset cerebral harm, hemorrhage, thrombosis, trauma, Charcot-Wilbrand syndrome, specifically characterized by visual agnosia and loss of ability to mentally recall or revisualize images. Face blindness, in other words, which can be triggered by lesions in the parietal lobe or the right fusiform gyrus. What you have sounds more like being so tired overall, you just forget your dreams as soon as you wake up, which is a far better deal, because we can fix that. How? Oh, by using memory tricks to build you a personal dreamland, one worth the exploration. The more attractive we make sleep as a process, the longer you'll want to spend there. So we make it into a reward, not a chore. She gave me a smile. I know, it sounds like mumbo-jumbo, but trust me, it really does work. So long as you don't use skepticism as an excuse to be half-assed about it. I have no plans in that direction, I said dryly. Excellent. She scribbled something on her prescription pad. I'm also prescribing a drug regimen, short but sweet, just to help kick things off. A mild sedative combined with a very mild hallucinogen, so you won't have to work too hard. Stop by the pharmacy on your way out. Me, being who I am, born and raised in a paved-over former paradise-turned-current parking lot, I opted to make my own dream map strictly urban, not rural. I picked the quarters of Toronto I knew best, then strung them along a mental subway loop from least to most interesting. Rosedale, the young Dundas downtown core, Distillery District, Queen West Village, the Annex. A favorite used bookstore became my anchor point, the end of my quest. It was the place I felt most relaxed and comfortable in real life, so why not? Good as any other. Remember, this was all theoretical at this point. Remember, too, how I didn't really expect that to change anytime soon. Gracie studied my map for a moment, frowning slightly. You may not end up where you want to following this, she told me at last. I shrugged again. I'm not sure I expect to end up anywhere, to tell the complete truth, I replied, to which she eventually quirked an eyebrow and smiled. We'll see, she said. That night, I lay down after taking my first pill. One nightly and no more, 30 minutes before bed, absolutely no mixing with alcohol. And shut my eyes, expecting nothing but the usual. A shallow handful of hours spent knotted in on myself, teeth grinding, hands fisted, light leaking in from outside, gradually bleaching my eyelid darkness red. Morning's familiar despair. Before Gracie, my idea of good sleep had been simple darkness at worst, nothing at best. A glitch, a blink, lost time. Followed, if God was good, by a refreshing sense of physical renewal. Laxness without lassitude, no aches or pains, no hangover. I had some vague idea that once upon a time, long ago in distant childhood, I'd almost always woken up happy, sharp, ready to jump up and get at it, whatever it might be. That had once been my natural state, the rule, not the exception. But it seemed so frankly impossible these days, I barely spared the matter a thought anymore. Just composed myself yet again, ready to suffer. Instead, without any clear sense of how it even might have happened, I found myself abruptly elsewhere. People I'd overheard talking about their dreams always claimed they couldn't tell they'd been having one half the time, except in hindsight. Interactions with dead relatives, talking animals and singing flowers, surreal landscapes, ordinary objects suddenly converted to starkly awesome fear totems. Flying while falling, falling while flying, it all just got taken in stride somehow. The abnormal normalized. Some put it down to simple neurology, a side effect of their brain's effort to protect itself proactively against a wholesale invasion of the uncanny, installing filters, building walls, the mental flinch before the equally mental bruise, improvably skull-shrouded, invisible even on MRI or X-ray. Whatever you see behind your shut lids must still come from you, though, right? I mean, where else? And that's why it always seemed so familiar, even when it's anything but. Suddenly, snapping conscious, or seeming to, and finding myself footsore yet upright, Achilles tendons stretched out and calves trembling slightly, wavering heavy-ankled in the center of an open, roughly circular, eerily quiet block of wilderness. Thick grass, Scattered trees, elm, birch, maple, hummocks, hills, and ivy-draped cliffs. Nothing unnatural, literally, yet all of it strangely regular, as though laid out on a grid. All of it with a very slight touch of design. Above, the sky hung striated, red and green and gray. The air smelled of ash. Furs underfoot coarse as hair, dew greasy. I wasn't wearing any shoes in the dream, so when I stepped forward, I felt something hidden jut up under my toes, hard, uneven. The submerged cobbles of a long-dead street, thrust apart by dirt and overlaid with mulch, then furred over by crop after follow crop of wind-blown seeds. Peering around, eyes narrowed, feeling the sun on my face, the wind at my back, a fresh, cool breeze with the mounting chill of deeper shadow barely hidden underneath, and thinking while I did, I know this place. Though I very palpably do not know this place, not in any way, shape, or form. Feel deep in my soul that I've been here before, even as I know for a fact I've never been here at all. Ridiculous. No one had ever been there, I realized later, back in the waking world, because that place didn't exist, had never existed. I was almost sure. Some people claim they can make themselves wake up the moment they understand they must be dreaming. But I hadn't been aware of my nighttime explorations long enough to learn that trick. The only viable alternative plan, I decided, was to pick a random direction and simply start walking until something stopped me. So that's exactly what I did. Vaguely right, sort of diagonal, possibly south? I followed the dead road's corkscrew track whenever I found it, trying not to trip as the cartoon sky roiled above me. No insects, no animals, no human noises, however distant. Eventually, after who knows how long, a particularly sharp turn snagged me, and I stumbled, almost going down on one knee. My hand met the largest chunk of cobblestone thus far, palm first, wetting itself with what I thought at first was blood, until I wiped it on my pants. Too dark, too shiny. Oily asphalt and gravel, with a forked line of white paint scored down one side, like the broken pieces of roadway you see around every pothole in Toronto during the summer roadwork season. And with that, the whole scene snapped into, not focus exactly, but clarity. The picture hidden inside the illusion. This was my city, it turned out. Or it had been. That flat green square off to my right, great mounds of grass-covered rubble on every other side, intersected by waving, urine-colored stands and sprays of weeds. It was Yonge Street, and Dundas, the junction, but reduced to long, empty wreck and ruin, digested by wilderness. I turned slowly in place, 360 degrees, overlaying Toronto's downtown, on top of this wasteland, and seeing it match, point for point. Even then, I don't remember feeling horror, grief, or any of the other things you'd expect. Simply a vague confusion. Senseless. No sense. Nonsense. I only saw the temple once I'd completed my full circuit. Set in the far corner of the flat sward that had once been young Dundas Square, and I was absolutely certain it hadn't been there when I'd first looked around. It appeared more like an amphitheater than anything else. A sunken cup, surrounded by concentric walls, with an empty space down in the middle. There was nothing like an altar, no signs or images, no icons, only a circular hole in the center, like a beehive turned inside out. But by the time I was standing in it, and when the hell had I done that? Walked over, stepped in, why was I there now? The silence became even deeper. Cathedral, funereal. A low, gray hum. Cold air breathed from that black gap at my feet, whispering up the broken steps I saw spiraling down into it. Discolored wine vomit splotches ringed it, sunk deep into the stone. The stains round a dead drunk's mouth. And here, I felt my stomach clench for the first time, coldly filling in with fear, or its dimmest echo, thinking dully, please, not down there. Of course, I went, trudging down the steps into the cold, the black, down and down and down, until I was too exhausted to even imagine turning around to climb back up, which might well have been why I didn't scream when the stone vanished under my feet, when I fell face first into the dark. Why I only screamed when I dimly began, at long last, to see exactly what I was falling towards. But here I lost it. A memory falling from my mind to shatter like a dropped dish, as I jackknifed awake with hammering heart, burning eyes, and raw, rasping throat. I clenched my hands before me, pressed to my breastbone, gulping down air, hunched amid twisted, sodden sheets. The awful color of the light that had swelled around me, some horrid, poisonous shade of yellow-green, lingered on my retinas like the afterflash of a strobe, thinking, something coming. Something is coming. What? Jesus, I croaked aloud, half wanting to weep, yet not able to, not then. Not now, either. Gracie was silent for more than a few seconds after I told her all this the next day. Well, she said at last, let's focus on the positive. Even with the interruption, you got a total of 8 hours sleep last night. For the first time in how long? That was the antithesis of restful, Gracie, I said flatly. Yes, but it's an amazing improvement for your first night. And it means we can write off the possibility of brain injury. Really? 'Cause if this is the cure, I think I'd rather have the damage. I leaned forward, prodding the map between us with my finger. I don't ever want to go back there, map or no map. I won't. Then you don't have to. Gracie held up her hands, palms out. Don't like this map? Draw another. She shuffled it to a nearby file folder, grabbed her pad, and scribbled a few notes. I'll tweak your script, too. We may not need the hallucinogen as much as I thought. That's it? I demanded. Aren't we supposed to, go over the dream, figure out what it means? Gracie shrugged. We could if you want, but honestly that strikes me as a distraction. She closed the pad and leaned forward again, looking earnest. Alex, I know this is difficult, but believe me, it'll all be worth it in the end. I let my breath out in a sigh. Fine, I said, picking up the sketch pad and another pencil and turned to a blank page. This time, the map had been chronological rather than geographical. I'd sketched out all the houses I'd ever lived in, from a tiny apartment out in Brampton with my father, through various Torontonian townhouses and converted semi-detached units, to the current condo. When I shut my eyes and found myself standing in the marble-tiled lobby of my own building, I folded my arms, the mental semblance of them anyhow, in deep satisfaction. It was only when I passed by the open door of the building's coffee lounge that I caught a glimpse of grass, with a telltale flash of stone hidden under it, heard the low gray sound of hollow wind. The shock hit me right in my stomach, like a punch. I actually wobbled on my feet, then turned and ran. Maybe if I had more experience dreaming, I'd have known not to expect that tactic to work. Or maybe not. People do seem to keep on trying to extricate themselves from repetitive nightmares, however useless it always proves. One way or the other, the effort proved fruitless. After what felt like a quarter of an hour spent crossing the lobby, I hauled open the main double doors and staggered out, only to find myself right back onto that flat plain, which looked even wider this time, stretching from horizon to horizon like images of the prairies in winter. Yellowish-gray corn stalks, harvest's detritus, whipping in the wind, gangrene-colored clouds racing by overhead. I spun, and my building was gone. But the temple was there instead, of course, slap bang in the middle of the flatland, ring of gray stone, a black crater at its heart. Cold air perceptibly welling up from the dark. The cup, the well, and the stairs going down. Oh, God. Don't know if I said it or I thought it. It didn't help either way. Tried to run once more in the other direction till I was gasping and dizzy, only to look up and find the temple back in front of me again. Tried yet one more time, closing my eyes, not stopping until I stumbled over that gap and nearly fell down the stairs, clinging to the side with both hands, at which point it frankly just didn't seem worth fighting anymore. Muscle memory led the way, unprompted and unwanted, as I tested each step with my feet, just barely able to pull back from the point where the stairs vanished, plastered against the stone wall as I stared down into the abyss. A tiny speck of light glimmered some unimaginable distance below me. The same nauseating yellow-green as before, gut-wrenching even at a distance. My grip was uncertain. The stone felt soapy under my fingers, slippery, as if fat-coated. Far away, in the back of my head, I could almost hear a woman's voice, singing some fragment of a plaintive miner's lament, Appalachian style. I'm down in a hole, I'm down in a hole, I'm down in a deep dark hole. I don't know how long I stood there, if that even means anything. All I remember is that sick, spine-shaking jerk of my foot, slipping on the stone, shooting out from under me as I tried to the very last not to move, cold air burning my face as I fell, that ghastly light coming at me like a hammer, throat bursting with screams as I finally saw what was in it. There, then gone. An empty space. A hole inside a hole inside a hole. For all that forgetting should have been a good thing, surely. I shook awake feeling like I'd just witnessed a death foretold. My own, maybe? And knowing, now knowing, there was no way on earth it wouldn't happen again. Something is coming. A week, then 2, 7 nights, 14 more, 8 hours a night, sometimes more. But when I looked in the mirror, all I saw was the blue-gray shadows under my eyes, steadily deepening. Hygienic as my sleep cycle might have seemed from the outside, I was still tired to my very bones in a way that only looked likely to get worse. I felt caught in a loop, a snare. I couldn't see my way out. Before you ask, meanwhile, yes, I stopped taking the drug. I stopped taking the drug about 5 nights in, and no, it didn't help. I woke up in yet another field, in a ravine, in a crevasse. The first time I thought it was a hangover, prescription still making its way out of my system, but there I was, following the crevasse along, tracing a trickle of muddy river, only to turn a sharp corner and find myself at the very place where the temple's door should be. The very threshold. The very next night, meanwhile, I started off inside what looked like to have been a parking garage, 2 floors below street level, so I deliberately turned and went down instead of up, found a door, opened it, right into the temple's stairway. The grim, fading light, those steps leading down, down, down. Into the well. And yes, again, the name came to me here and then in the dream. I've never thought of it as anything else since. This shit is worse than homeopathy, I complained to my GP 2.5 weeks in, not feeling like facing Gracie again. I was slumped against the wall, still in my paper gown, too exhausted to stand. I mean, at least that doesn't do anything. Gracie's map drawing crap is actually making a bad situation worse. She'd just given me an all-over exam, entering the initial results as she sat there nodding, one eyebrow cocked. "Not according to your numbers," was all she had to say in return, at last, angling the page towards me so I could see for myself, like she really thought that proved anything. The only good part of which, I guess, was that it at least made me mad enough to force myself back upright again. "Yeah, okay," I managed, grabbing for my clothes, "but riddle me this. What do you really know about Gracie Hollander anyhow? What can you attest to, professionally?" My GP thought it over. "Well," she said at last, "I know her methods work. Always, for everybody. Like it was gospel. Always." "Better start working soon, then," I muttered, momentarily diffused. Sometimes all I can think is that nobody believes in the assumed social contract between a doctor and patient quite as much as doctors themselves do. Which is good, I suppose, really, they sort of have to, seeing how it's all that keeps them from abusing their authority till it bleeds. So, yeah, I don't know whether I thought Gracie was mishandling my case deliberately or what. By that point, frankly, I could have been thinking all sorts of crap. I was, on paper, physically. I was well rested and firmly on my way to recovery. But my mind didn't feel that way at all. Even if that was happening with my body, provably, there's no way my mind believed it. 3 days on, though, I sat in Gracie's office once more, my own file open in front of me. I spread the sheaf of discarded maps out, then had the strange impulse to lay them over top each other, stacking them clockwise. The paper was thin enough you could see them form what looked like one huge circular chart. "Like a whole other world," Gracie remarked, her tone oddly admiring. As she stared down, eyes never leaving the map made from maps, studying its multiple-choice fan-shaped destiny of paths for all the world as though, on some level, she was beginning to recognize them. Each route made a sliver of a quadrant, filling the whole thing in. I pointed to the result, and she studied it, eyes narrowing, because, done this way, it seemed fairly undeniable how, no matter where they might have begun, all roads did indeed lead to Rome. The fallow field, the temple, the hole, the well. "What made you choose to call it that, you think?" Gracie asked, gaze still held fast, doodling a series of unintelligible notes in her sketchpad's margin. "No idea," I replied. "But you do see it, right? The pattern?" "I see what looks like to you a pattern, yes?" I snorted. "Then look again, goddammit," tapping the papers as she did. "No matter where I start, I always end up there, every time. Does that seem normal to you?" She smiled, eyes crinkling adorably, pointing out. "Normal's a fairly negotiable concept, Alex." I shook my head, neck sparking, impatience fierce as rage. "No, but seriously, distraction or not, why would I keep on doing that to myself? Why the temple? The hole? Why those endless fucking stairs? All night, every night? What's the goddamn point of it all exactly?" She was frowning slightly now, pen still going a veritable mile a minute. "In dream language, the well is a very primal image," she allowed at last. "Basic shorthand, the place where Jung and Freud meet, it can symbolize change under pressure, sometimes forcible, beyond your control. More shallowly, it could stand for anything which opens inwards, a mouth, a door, a grave, your own vagina even." "Pretty sure it's not that," I snapped back, annoyed. "But my point is," She continued over top as though I hadn't even spoken. Most people in general dream of wells, even repeatedly. It's not just you. A lot of my other clients do it too. Wells or well? I don't know what you mean by that, Alex. I tapped the ream of paper between us. Like, this well? That's what I mean. Do most of your other clients also dream of this well, maybe? That's ridiculous. I could hear the words coming out of my mouth, but didn't seem able to stop them. It was like I'd finally been pushed beyond my limits. So far, my internal sensor had popped a fuse. Like something inside me had simply burnt out, leaving me as naked in daylight as I felt during the dark, down the well, clinging to my unreliable perch as I teetered in the bare instant before the fall, forever hovering between fear of the unknown and whatever unknown thing I feared. Oh yeah, I'm pretty sure, I snapped back before adding far too brightly. But could I really trust you to tell me if they did? This is where my research phase would surely have started if this was another sort of story. Plunged myself into the internet, found myself some sort of magic keyhole giving me access to other people's medical records, where I would have waited until Gracie went home and broken into her office using my mad lockpicking skills, the ones I'd picked up osmotically by watching an assload of CSI Crime Scene Investigation holiday marathon installments, where I would have been able to find exactly what I was looking for on the first try just by glancing through her filing system, some sort of paper trail or pixel trail, some patient or colleague who'd bonded hard with Gracie, volunteered to prove her theories correct, then disappeared up her own repetitive dream cycle forever, leaving no forwarding address, some case zero that would prove I was right in my frankly demented suspicion about Gracie's methodology, about the reasoning behind her continually pushing me to keep doing exactly what I'd been doing thus far, yet act as though I truly expected a different result, however many times I might have had to try before that happened, like some goddamn crazy person. Which I probably was by now. True, sleep-deprived, hallucinating, yeah, I can see it from the outside. The way I couldn't back then when I was in it neck-deep. The way no one ever can in similar situations. In hindsight, the only sort of sight I have to reckon by, this is what I realized I must have been looking for afterwards. But no, that's not the way it went. Because when it comes to solving your own dreams puzzle, the only investigative tool available to a person in my position is a willingness to do things personally, confrontationally, take a leap of faith, however potentially damning, take the challenge between your mental teeth and run. I went home, took a bath, lay down, closed my eyes, let the nightmare enfold me yet one more time, welcomed it with open arms. Just lay down in the dark and let whatever was going to happen, happen.
Something is coming.
The voice whispered once more under that cold wind. But the well itself didn't move, ever. Remained the fulcrum, the still point at the center of this otherwise fluid world. And, am I the thing that's coming then? I wondered before finally relinquishing that last step, plunging downward into darkness voluntarily for once. Was that always me? Only one way to find out. The green light came at me bullet fast this time, as I felt a wrench that cracked my whole dream's spine. Felt things around me splinter, split, and branch cracks extending fractally in every possible direction, like roots from some invisible tree. They reached upwards, spiking into the shimmering shadows of what seemed like 100 brains at once, scattered countrywide, yet all asleep and dreaming the same dream. 100 other sleepers, presumably linked by Gracie's therapy and or prescriptions, all making their slow way across 100 different landscapes towards the exact same destination. Not a habit, not a chore, a ritual pilgrimage infinitely shared, bleak and black though it might be. A method of worship. Around me, the well flipped itself front to back, to inside out, becoming a tower, a beacon, descent into ascent, stairs down into stairs up, those still hammered haphazardly together from the same crumbling, greasy stone, each cobble a puzzle piece only lightly intertwined, a relic from some age before mortar, and at the top, laid open to that glaring gangrene-colored sky whose stars were nothing like the stars we see from Earth, someone waited. Who? I didn't know their name. Even now. Even here. I never expected to. But I knew that voice. In a hole, cast herself down the well. Just like me, I thought, not knowing why. Then, just like me. Oh God, oh Jesus fucking God, just like me. And here, it spoke. The same too familiar voice, skull resonant, even masked under the well's low gray din. The ruin-echoed blood slosh of some long-dead ocean on some long, empty world.
Gracie?
It asked, apparently to the empty air.
Is that you? Did you come after me? To find me? Has this been long enough? I drew you a map, but I went too far. I lost it. Can I finally come home?
Oh, what the hell? I swallowed hard enough. Something seemed to scrape. Suddenly dry from lips to esophagus. My tongue felt numb, stinging. I'm not Gracie, I told it, finally, wincing at how weak my voice sounded in that unhallowed space. As I spoke, the person, or more a thing really, greenish-black on greenish-purple-red, more an absence where someone used to be, an echo rather than the person itself, shifted its attention onto me fully, or appeared to, stood watching me from afar, but not quite far enough, and though I couldn't see its eyes, not even at that distance, I knew somehow it recognized me. Could almost feel the words graze me all over like snakeskin or a poisoned tongue. A lack of voice, almost too alien to organize itself into words, yet hearing them nonetheless, if only in some highly primitive way. Tasting, smelling their most basic meaning, born on a burnt skin stink wave, reading them out loud and translating from a foreign language, even as they carved themselves, stroke by cauterized stroke, into my mind's soft meat.
Oh yes. So it's you. Finally. Did Gracie send you after me?
It asked after an eon. Not as such.
Then why are you here? How did you...
I shrugged, helpless. I don't know, was all I could say. We stood there a minute more. Several. Crawling like fossils, like erosion. Shale tectonically crushed against shale. All the slowest moments of the earth.
I was someone before I got here.
The thing told me, almost sadly.
Now I'm something else. No one can stay who they are. Not for long.
I nodded, trying not to breathe. Not that it seemed to need my agreement exactly.
If I let you leave...
It began again, slyly.
Will you? go see her, Gracie? When you wake up, will you tell her what you found?
If? Jesus Christ. My stomach clenched against the very idea, knotted itself off like a bag, burning bile. But I wouldn't let the implication faze me, not for long. I couldn't. If you do, then... yes, I replied carefully.
Of course I will. No sense not. Neither of us get what we want if I don't.
I agreed, not trusting my words any longer in silent, dumb show, bowed my head, spread my hands, pinched a helpless smile and felt, rather than saw, it, bare, broken teeth at the spectacle, half amused, but all angry, colder than death and twice as raw.
Thank me for that, Alice.
It suggested. Thank you.
Tell her I want to go home, but I don't know the way. Tell her I need a map. The map.
I nodded. The one you drew, right?
No. The one she drew for me. She knows which.
All right.
Be very sure to tell her, Alice, or we'll see each other again.
Another clutch. Body-wide this time, running me like a gamut from top to toe. I had to wait just a few more beats to have any hope of self-control, let alone avoid dying of sheer existential terror before I got the chance to answer. I don't think either of us want that, I said at last, and felt the thing give something not at all like a laugh in return, resonant with the universe's anti-rotation, so awful on a cosmic level that simply acknowledging it risked madness. Just the touch of that laugh killed something inside me, some capacity I hadn't known I had until then. But by that point, frankly, I was glad to feel it go. When you ask me where Gracie Hollander can possibly have disappeared to, officers, you must therefore take the proceeding as my very poor stab at an explanation. Or not, I absolutely understand if you didn't. You tell me she had a partner once, long ago, and I nod. You tell me that partner helped her develop her methods, as well as the drug regimen that bolsters them. That this woman disappeared as well, years back, with similarly little trace left behind. It was as though she slid off the world's surface, slipped through a crack to somewhere underneath, as if she'd tripped, unseen by anyone else in her life, and fallen down a deep, dark hole. You say this, and I nod. No other response seems suitable. It all sounds extremely plausible indeed to me, but I don't have anything else to tell you, unfortunately, beyond what you've already heard. I simply can't remember. I'm not capable of it. I'm back to not dreaming at all, thank Christ, though I maintain the hygiene of my sleep habits zealously. Of course, the brain damage has a lot to do with the former, if not the latter. My GP thinks it might have been a series of small strokes brought on by stress in the wake of my insomnia. All I know is that since I woke that last time, I've basically been unable to picture anything visually inside my head at all. If I didn't have this document to remind me I'd once been able to, I'd be tempted to assume everyone around me is lying or joking whenever they claim they can. Not classic prosopagnosia per se, but I do have a lot of trouble telling one person from another, unless I use certain tricks, recognizing voices, or knowing where people are likely to be at any given time, or categorizing people by their accessories, their favorite t-shirts, the color of their hair, eyes, skin. It sounds bad to say, for example, but because there are only so many black people I know, if somebody with dark skin comes up to me using my first name and acting like we're friends, I'll always give them the benefit of the doubt. I actually thought one of you might be a friend of mine when you first walked in, but by now I've certainly spoken with you long enough to understand I must have been mistaken. The minute you leave, however, my ability to remember you will go straight back down to 0. I'll reset like a bad alarm system, waiting for the next person to set me off. The worst part is my family. They can't understand why I can't tell, say, my own mother from any other woman on the street. And I can't blame them for that. But there's nothing to be done, and by now, I'm used to it. My nights are neither long nor dark anymore. They pass in a blink. I wake refreshed, remembering nothing. If something still lurks behind my eyes, dug deep into that interior landscape I can no longer map, then it's invisible to me, completely, utterly, safely so. I'll never see it coming. I prefer it that way. If you'd been where I have, you would too.
The best fiction hits you where you live, or where you think you live, and sometimes it hits you where you sleep. I have sleep apnea, which is basically where your throat relaxes during the night and closes your airway. Left untreated, it can get pretty dangerous. I am not untreated, but it was getting worse for a while back there. I've now been diagnosed, and I have a CPAP machine, which basically means I wear a mask when I sleep that pushes compressed air onto my face and into my airway. Now that sounds horrible, doesn't it? But it really isn't. When my airway relaxes, the air reopens it. It even has this happy little smiley face on it for when I've got a good mask seal. It tells me how long I've slept and tells me how many incidents of sleep apnea I've had in the previous night. That varies, for me, between about 0.8 and 2.7 an hour. 5 is considered average. This thing works. It hasn't saved my life, but good God has it improved the quality of it and my appreciation for sleep itself. I have my whole brain for the first time in what I suspect might be a couple of years, and I am so happy to have it back. So a story like this is going to take me to the edge of some dark places, and if not quite drag me in, then certainly make me aware of where that edge is. This line especially, just composed myself yet again, waiting to suffer, is a pretty great description of where I was when this was bad, and it has that uniquely fuzzy, beveled linguistic edge of the not quite awake enough, of knowing you do not have your full brain, and not knowing what to do about it. The key to the horror here, for me, is the collision between the small and personal, and the absolute and vast. The protean nature of the human subconscious colliding with the simple need to get some sleep. The subtly sketched-in conflict that leads to what would, in a more conventional story, be a confrontation. Instead, the idea of "don't like this map? Draw one yourself" is simultaneously a call to arms and a hymn to privilege. It's never easy to change your terrain, but it's rarely as easy for others as you think. Especially as there's an implication here that the sleep therapy is pulling double duty as a binding. A whole other story, hundreds of them, in fact, powering this one, dimly glimpsed in the fog and all the more terrifying for that ambiguity. Perhaps that's why I like the ending so much. In another story, this would be resolved by a fist fight in Dreamworld, and that's always a fun time, if not always an original one, but here, it's another problem to be solved by people with barely enough consciousness to cope with day-to-day life. Here, the idea of being lost inside the subconscious, the monstrous nature of the intrusion into your mind, is enough to make a compromise vital. Peace and quiet at a price, and neither especially peaceful or especially quiet. The blurred line of human identity, the blurred line of morality, the blurred line of consciousness, all intersecting to create a precisely focused and acutely observed piece of horror. Brilliantly done. Thank you all. I'm off to hug my CPAP machine. We're now paying associate editors, who are slush readers and the first line of contact for every magazine and author. They are the unsung heroes of the industry, and we're singing them. We're currently paying all 4 shows' associate editors at a reduced rate, because we aren't quite at the target donation level yet, but it was time to get this done. So we still need your help. In fact, we need your help in general, because we're entirely donation funded, and have been, with the exception of very occasional ads, for the last 15 years. You pay for everything. Stories, staff, tech, all of it, and from the bottom of my heart, in the bottom of my partner's heart, thank you for that. But like I say, we still need your help in any way you can give it. Now, if that way is money, it's really easy. Go to Patreon or PayPal and subscribe for as little as $5 a month. You'll get access to all manner of audio goodies, and on Patreon, higher levels too will unlock really interesting new stuff. Alternatively, if you can't afford to help us out financially, and I know many people can't, times are tough, that's fine. Consider helping us out with time. Leave a review of an episode you liked on your podcatcher of choice. Blog about something. Link to an episode you liked. All of that stuff. Have us on your show if you have one yourself. We love doing that kind of thing. All of that helps like you wouldn't believe. Oh, two other things as well. We now have a Twitch channel, which we're on twice a week. Once doing relaxed video gaming on Sunday mornings, UK time, and once doing spooky readings and guests Wednesday night, UK time. You can help there too if you have Amazon Prime. You can actually donate $5 a month through Twitch to us for free. It's a little fiddly, but we have a walkthrough for you at escapeartists.net/Twitch. So do go check that out if you can. And do you want some t-shirts? Because we have some amazing new t-shirts. We've partnered with Dread Singles, Mr. Jordan Shively, and the fantastic Void merch store he runs to do a whole Escape Artists collection. New designs for every show, and they're amazing. We'll put the link in the show notes. Do go check them out. Next week will be a production of Escape Artists Incorporated and released under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial No Derivatives license, just like usual. Our story will be an American remake of a Japanese ghost story from There Is No Death, There Are No Dead from Crystal Lake Publishing. Your narrator will be Ashley Lawrence, I'll be your host, Chelsea will be on audio production, and the story itself will come from the incomparable Lead Baron. We'll leave you with this quote from Neil Gaiman & Co.'s The Sandman. Things need not have happened to be true. Tales and adventures are the shadow truths that will endure when mere facts are dust and ashes and forgotten. See you next time.
It's a PseudoPod. It's a big foot.
It's all about podcasts these days.